Hi there. It's another edition of PM Express Business with me, Philip Nanfuri, and we're celebrating 25 years of joy and 25 years of excellence here at the Multimedia Group. Thanks for your company this evening. Tonight's show, we want to dissect the coronavirus conundrum, or COVID-19, which has now been declared a pandemic. We want to assess the preparedness of businesses right here in Ghana and the resilience of businesses, and see if the coronavirus hits our shores, touch wood, how are we going to come out of a quagmire like this? So we're going to be doing that. But before we begin our discussion with my two wonderful guests, I want us to have a snapshot of the numbers as to where the virus is in terms of total confirmed cases, number of deaths, number of recoveries, and the spread across the globe. So right now we have a total of 127,863 cases, and this is from Johns Hopkins University website. We have a total deaths, or total number of deaths, at 4,718, and then the total number of recoveries at 68,310. If you look at the spread in terms of the number of cases, China still holds the largest. Italy, we've seen that the increase in number of cases has also gone up. We've seen Iran also. So now China, Italy, Iran, South Korea, France, Spain, Germany, and then the US, they seem like the countries with the most numbers, but it's spread across, some may argue, the entire globe. Now, if you come down to the African region, I'm sure in the past few days you've heard about cases in our immediate neighbors, so Togo, Burkina Faso, and Cote d'Ivoire. Then other parts of the African continent also, we've seen a number of cases in Egypt also peak. We've seen a number of cases in South Africa also go up. We've seen the Algerian issues, Senegal, and then the likes of it. And some were arguing today, if you follow in international media, some have been asking why the virus is not really going around on the African continent. There are a lot of theories surrounding that, some emotional discussions surrounding it. I wouldn't get into the details of it. So that's the global picture with regards to the coronavirus. We looked at the number of cases, deaths, and most importantly, for us, good news, the recoveries, how people are coming out of this. And we looked at the African continent also. Now, I want us to look at a broad discussion on the impacts of it on the different spheres of the economy. So we have a number of infographics that were put together by Victor Menz. He's a very good graphic designer down in our production department, and he's put this together. And I want us to start off with the economy bit, and just to put things into perspective. On the global side, there are issues, but what about Ghana? We know that forecasts for GDP growth globally may have to be slashed. What about Ghana? We are a commodity-dependent economy, oil, gold, cocoa. If demand for these commodities drops because of slow demand globally, what happens to Ghana's GDP growth rates? We already have an issue with regards to oil prices on the back of the coronavirus and the rumpus between OPEC and some of its members as to supplies and cutting supplies or increasing supplies of oil on the market. So we should expect some things. I'm sure I've already seen some from international media when it comes to the economy. Economies are suffering. So that's just for the economy bit. So you can look at it from a myriad of areas, but we'll be delving into the Ghanaian specific examples with my guests. Now, on the issue of financial markets, what are financial markets? Where we buy and sell assets. So financial markets, we have your foreign exchange markets, gold, commodities, etc. Over the past few days, I'm sure you've heard on international media again that stocks in international markets are tumbling, are taking a nosedive, are taking a hit. What does that mean? People are selling off their holdings. So if I'm a stockholder of a company and there are sentiments, negative sentiments surrounding this company, I'll sell off my shares and hold my money rather than hold stock in the company. Because if this stock price falls, what I'm holding will be worthless. So you've seen that now people are pushing their funds or their holdings into gold, and we've seen an increase in the price of gold, spot gold. Why gold? Because gold is regarded as a safe haven asset. Stocks are risk assets in terms of the fact that risk, it can go bad, it can go good for you at any time. But gold, relatively stable because of its solid nature, and most investors are going in there. We're a country that has foreign investors also participating in our bond markets. If they exit our bond markets, it means that they are exiting their holdings. We have to pay them off in foreign currency, very simply. Do we have enough dollar supply on the market? Are we going to bring in enough in terms of our exports? These are all the connections we need to make in the arguments surrounding the coronavirus. So that's for financial markets. These are very broad things. I'm trying to make them a bit small and narrow for easy understanding. So after financial markets, there we can move on to aviation. And we've already seen that a number of countries have instituted travel bans, travel restrictions. Yesterday we saw President Donald Trump announce flights from EU into the US. There will be a ban on that also. So with the cancellation of flights comes a reduction in the profit margins or revenue margins of airline companies. And then the effects are ripple. If you have business to transact in a country that has instituted a travel ban, you can't go ahead and conduct your business in no way. If people are coming to Ghana, some are a bit skeptical. Maybe flights can be rerouted elsewhere, routes change, airlines change, and all these things affect profits of airlines. And it spreads not only the airlines, but even the airport structures, fees and revenues generated from the influx of airlines. So that's one part. So we've seen economy, we've seen financial markets, we've seen aviation. The last one I want to talk about is the hospitality industry. Yes, we like going to hotels, resorts, etc. I remember when the outbreak started, there was an issue about Macau. Macau is a place in the east, or let's say a gambling site, or I would say Disneyland for grown-ups. It's a fun place to be, gambling, casinos, resorts, etc. And the number of visitors there reduced with the influx of the virus. So you see that hotels, resorts, attractions will be affected. And let's consider Ghana, for example. Again, we have not recorded a case here yet, by God's grace. So if you look at it, if there is something, God forbid, these affect tourism sites, again, goes to affect profit margins, revenues of government, etc. So these are four broad areas I put together to give us some insights on the coronavirus. So we're taking a quick break. We'll be right back to continue our conversation. Right, we welcome back from the break, and this is the business edition of PM Express. My first guest, Mr. Apia Adomako. He's the regional director of CATS International, and Seth Chumakwaba, he's the CEO of Association of Ghana Industries. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express. I want to start with you, Mr. Adomako. We will be examining preparedness and the resilience of businesses. Snapshots with the Ghanaian context. I've given us a global picture of things. With the Ghanaian context, for you, as somebody who plays in the business space, do you think our business environment is adequately prepared and can be resilient if there's a case of coronavirus, touch wood, in Ghana?
Okay, thank you very much, Philip. I would say that businesses went last year, end of last year, preparing their plan for 2020 without having in mind that there's going to be any coronavirus. So businesses made plans for all things being equal, but now things are not equal, and that requires a lot of adjustment. However, we have seen from countries that have become the earlier victims of this inferno or this scourge of the virus, that the economies could not withstand the tectonic forces of the virus. And so I believe that once we are hit here, Ghanaian businesses may not be able to surmount the challenges that comes with the virus.
Mr. Akwaba, Mr. Adumaku mentioned that last year, I'm sure when people were forecasting, election year related concerns dominated projections as to where things will go. So the election year fears, the CD, etc., were some of the main concerns. We didn't see this coronavirus coming from anywhere. As the Association of Ghana Industries, manufacturing is critical to this economy. What do you think is our level of preparedness when it comes to this dealing with this crisis? Other economies are doing a lot in terms of boosting liquidity, etc. We'll come to more examples of that. But in the Ghanaian context, what do you think our level of preparedness is?
Well, thank you very much. As Mr. Pierre rightly said, we really didn't prepare for this, that there was going to be this situation at the beginning of the year. So it's taken us by surprise. It's really a big shock to businesses in Ghana, and manufacturers in particular. And therefore, the level of preparedness, I would say, is very low. However, as business people, when you are confronted with a situation, you need to find a way to survive. Survival is critical. And therefore, in a situation like this, people begin to think of alternatives to be able to survive. The challenge we've had, when it started, we all thought it was a China problem, and therefore one would have said, okay, if you are getting your source of raw material, for example, from China, then why don't you look elsewhere? But here we are, it's affecting the entire global market. So it makes it even more challenging. And the level of preparedness is really weak, because otherwise people would have even tried to stock a bit in terms of raw materials so that you can have consistent production of your produce. It is not going to happen. So it is a bit of a challenge. But I know that a lot of our companies plan a bit ahead. And the planning, of course, there's a time horizon. I'm not sure they will plan beyond the second quarter, when they will stock raw materials to produce for the third quarter and the fourth quarter. So by the second quarter, if the situation does not come to normalcy, we will have a serious challenge. Unfortunately, in the manufacturing realm, in the short run, factors of production are not that easy to expand. Otherwise, one would say, whilst we are having challenges with the imports of goods, it could be finished goods and raw materials, then why don't you develop local sources of supplies? Because some of the products we are importing, we can also get them locally. But to suddenly and within this short period develop alternatives and produce to supply, or if it comes to agricultural products, for example, if you want fruit juices and agro-processing products, those that we are not producing and we are importing, how can you within this short period produce enough to supply your factories? So it's a bit of a challenge. It does not mean that there's nothing we can do. Perhaps volumes will come down in terms of output, because you may not get enough supplies. But if we think through and develop good strategies, we will not have to close down completely. We would reduce volumes, but we'll still be able to survive. Survival is critical at this stage.
I just need to ask this follow-up question. Over time, we always hear that most of our imports are from China. We are overly exposed to China and stuff like that. From the manufacturing perspective, as an association of industries, can that also apply to you, that your members' exposure to China is quite high? Or we are getting wrong, because mostly we say it, but sometimes we need people within to tell us that this is the case. Would that be the case for the manufacturing industry or the Association of Ghana Industries, that your exposure to China is so high that if by the second quarter things don't stabilize, that's it?
Yes, actually, yes. To a large extent, that's true. We import a lot from China. Ghana, we are highly dependent on China now. I think about 23% or more of our total imports is coming from China. Within ECOWAS, it's less than 20. Some of the neighboring countries, about 12% and all that. Other African countries, South Africa, 6%. So the percentages are low. A lot of it is coming from China. And it's not only finished goods that are coming from China, it's also the raw materials. So some of the tester, raw materials is coming from China, electrical and electronics. Some of the aluminum products for our metal sector production, they are all coming from China. So it's a lot coming from China. However, the issue today is that it's not only China that is affected. Several other countries, Europe is also heavily affected now. So even beyond China, where are the other sources? They are all affected. And the travel bans that are coming, the difficulty in moving around, and when you are bringing goods, raw materials or whatever, you really need to move around to do business. And all these are being curtailed. So the effect is not just the China issue, it's also the fact that it's a global issue. But of course, the dependency on China is very heavy now. Therefore, I mean, China is contributing about 70% of the global GDP. So if they are down, you can imagine the effect on the global economy. And countries such as us, which are smaller and weaker, then we have a challenge.
I'll come back to you, Seth, on some of the things superpowers, economic superpowers are doing for the country, and see if Ghana can also match up to that. Mr. Adomako, you articulated some points I got from you on regards to the manufacturing sector. I want to read two of them. And you said plants and machineries, new ones and repairs will not be ready. This will slow down production. Job cuts is obvious. Some companies cannot survive if the crisis remains until May. I see a very gloomy picture you've painted here. If you were at the helm of affairs, what would you propose as a way out if we had a severe crisis within the shores of Ghana?
I think, like I said earlier, nobody knew this was going to happen. There wasn't enough writings on the wall, and for this thing to happen without any preparation, I think it requires a stepwise approach in solving this problem. If I were to be in charge of, I think I was supposed to ask you, in charge of what? That will help me to be able to.
Okay, maybe let's say you are a policymaker, the Minister of Finance in the country, a president, something like that. You are the one supposed to reassure the markets that this is all going to be well. What were some of the things with regards to the manufacturing sector, given the problems you have outlined? What will you do to counteract these problems you have outlined?
Okay, I think we all know that this government has started the 1D, 1F, which is kind of helping us to step up our local manufacturing. So it's something that we need to ensure that it goes on successfully. That is one. And also with regards to raw materials that we may not have beyond May or so, I think what we need to do as a country is to also to start looking at alternative source of sourcing of raw materials for production. Currently, most businesses in Africa and even in Ghana always look out to Asia, China and India for raw materials for us, their main primary input. And looking beyond China, I think will help us to reduce our exposure to China that much. For equipment and machineries, unfortunately, we don't have strong engineering firms to be able to manufacture equipment and machinery for us. And sometimes if you have some of your equipment and they even break down, you have to go and even import people to come from Asia and Europe to come and fix them for you. And now with this travel ban, I think that if your equipment breaks down, you may have to shut that particular unit until things get to normalcy. And this one, there's nothing that the president you can do or anybody can do within a short time. So it's something that has taken everybody by surprise. I think if we are able to scale up from this crisis, I think we have to do a soul searching and look at how and where we got it wrong, so that when such crisis comes again in the future, we'll be able to learn from it, because perhaps it's not going to be the last time we are having crisis. It was Ebola, but thank God Ebola didn't get to this level. Now it is COVID-19, and we don't even know where it will end.
Okay. Mr.
Yeah.
Augustine, forgive me. So, following the international media, you realize that particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, when the corona virus hit, or COVID-19, for example, the People's Bank of China, their central bank, cut rates so that liquidity is infused in the system. We saw President Donald Trump stating that he wants some waivers for payroll workers and all that. You've seen a lot of things, governments trying to infuse fiscal stimulus into companies, etc. In Ghana, if we had this situation, we've over time wanted to revamp manufacturing industries. Sometimes, and I know you bear me witness, the infusion of funds is not always a complete issue. We have fiscal constraints, high expenditures, low revenue as a country. What do you think? Or do you think if we had a similar situation here, can we implement some of the measures the Chinas, the US, etc. are doing for the economy as a whole, and then particularly the manufacturing sector or industries?
Well, there's a lot we have to do, and there's a lot we can do. Even though it may not solve the problem in its entirety, but in situations like this, you look at what it is that you can do to reduce the impacts. Basic necessities are important. What are the necessities of life? Food, clothing, and shelter. So when it comes to producers of these products, we should have special attention on them. Okay. Because you never want to run out of food. You never want to get to a point where you can have, adequate clothing on you, and then shelter becomes an issue. So the necessities of life, producers of those necessities, we have to look at them. Medicine related must also be looked at. Government has already pledged $100 million as per the president's statement yesterday. We need to quickly look at what to do with this. Apart from the fact that part of this money is going to be devoted to deal with the sensitization, the prevention and all that, we can also apply some to manufacturing activities. Eventually the vaccines will be discovered, will be developed. When it's developed, we need to produce them in large quantities. We need to position our pharmaceutical industries and give them some capacity. So as soon as the vaccines are developed, Ghana can also produce and supply. So you take advantage of such a difficult situation. It is very important. There are other areas we can also look at when it comes to the raw material supplies that we talked about. Some of them we can develop. It may not take that long. I know there are short-term measures and long-term measures. He talked about equipment. Within this short period, it will be difficult to have plants that are producing machine parts and all that. But these are things we've been talking about all the time. But that's for the future, so let's plan towards that. But basic raw materials, for food production, for textiles and all that, we can develop some of them so that when we provide a bit of support to our companies, then we are actually resolving some of the issues. One way also to look at our financing system, as you mentioned, interest rates should be coming down for companies to be able to take loans and do business and expand and all that. Bear in mind that we also have the after before, that is the Continental Free Trade Agreement. Yeah. If you're able to take advantage in any misfortune, you see a bit of blessing in there. What can we do to strategize and take full advantage of it? If within this period we're able to revamp some of our factories, then we are preparing also beyond the phase of this tragedy and going to Africa and export in large quantities. That could be an opportunity for us. So there's a lot we can do. We got to be strategic. Strategic in the sense that we need to start thinking of which products we are dealing with. In situations like this, you cannot affect every sector of the economy. You cannot do all products. You have to pick, select, and choose which ones we should focus on. And those that we focus on, which companies are producing them, what will it take for those companies to be revamped and expanded? If it is raw materials and we don't have them in Ghana, are they raw materials that we can develop here? Even though it may be at relatively expensive price, let's do it because we are doing it to show up our businesses. So there's a lot we can do. We just need to strategize very well and work on it.
This is a question I think I should have asked right after I asked you about the exposure of some of your members to China. It just came into my head. Do you have any members who are currently reeling from the effects of the coronavirus in China and other places? So let me give an example. If I'm part of the AGI, I bring in items from, let's say, China. All of a sudden, my main item I bring is from China. I can't get it anymore. I'm in a mess. Do you have members who are currently, for lack of a better word, in the doldrums because of what is going on, like it's so critical for some of these members? Do you have cases right now with the AGI?
At this particular moment, we've not reached that very critical stage. Even though there are a few companies that are calling and saying that we may be running short of raw materials at some point. But I think people imported quite a lot for the Christmas season, and were able to produce enough. So during the first quarter, imports of raw material may not be that much because companies plan ahead. And normally they have about 3-4 month cycle, you know. So for the first quarter, we've not had too many of these complaints. So if the problem is solved soonest, the impact will not be that bad and it will not be that negative. But if it doesn't, we are unable to resolve it and it continues and extends to the second quarter and beyond, then we'll get to that situation. So I just pray that we won't get there. And so for now, it's not as bad. Companies are doing business, the business is going on normally, but I can imagine that in the next couple of months, we'll start having such problems coming up.
Mr. Adomako, let me come to you on the broader Ghanaian economy. Let me posit a few points here. So, the Ghanaian economy from colonial era, post-colonial, current or contemporary times, dependence on commodities is very key, given our gold, our cocoa, timber, and now we have our black gold, oil. Now, let's just start with oil, for example. So we've seen the tumble in the prices. We have budgeted for the annual budget funding amount. We have our stabilization fund, heritage fund, all dependent on the oil. Now, we have a positive in there in terms of our imports being cheaper for oil, all things being equal. We also have a positive in there in terms of gold, in terms of the uptick in the prices. But again, one may argue there's a negative in there because if the demand from countries like China drops for our refined gold, we suffer. We have the cocoa also. There's a positive in there when we're importing chocolate. But again, our people in those producing countries actually producing chocolate for us to import. When you look at this general picture, some say there's always a silver lining on a cloud. What do you think we in Ghana, given this state, right now things haven't hit the fan, how do you think we can leverage to benefit properly, take advantage of what is going on right now to bring ourselves to the top?
I mean, currently we are the deep ocean, and when you're about to sink, it's not that a time that you want to start thinking about re-engineering anything new. So with our commodity prices going down, we've seen crude oil coming down as low as $33.34. Before I left office, I checked less than an hour ago. When we were preparing the budget, the forecast was 62.6, and government was expected to get close to 1.6 billion dollars from this. And we know that most of this money is going to be used to fund an annual budget funding amount and also free SHS. Yeah. So there's little that we have control on this particular issue. I mean, however, as a country, we need to use this as a lesson. I've always been saying that as a country, we must look at Ghana beyond commodities, because if you mortgage your whole economy on commodities, I think you always be in a bad shape whenever there are external shocks. And it seems we are not learning as a country. In 2014, crude oil prices came down, and then government had to put another taxes, special petroleum taxes on it. We even thought that some of those taxes on it will be used to invest in our research capacity as a country, so that Ghana can develop into other sectors that we are traditionally not known for. But when the prices recovered, we went and slept and still kept the prices there. So I think COVID-19 is a lesson for every country, and more importantly, as Ghana, that we need to start looking at Ghana beyond commodities. How do we position our industry so that they can continue to add value to our raw materials, so that once we export them, we can get better value for them, because if you keep on exporting primary commodities, the prices are not determined by you. Somebody sit at the New York or London Mercantile Exchange and they determine the prices. And how can you build your nation on that? I think we need to, sit up as a country and let this thing be a proper lesson. Now, I hope that after this, the president could set up a commission to look at the lessons that can be learned from this. And some of these lessons need to feed into our academic institutions and the way we do things, say that in the next 20 or 30 years, when something like this comes, Ghana will have our resilience on it.
Okay. Yeah. So I just need to bring this article in. This was put together by our team at the Joy Business Desk, and it's titled "Coronavirus Hits Ghana's Economy. Sino-Hydro Deal Cedis Appreciation Affected." And if you look into the article, it talks about, for example, the Sino-Hydro deal, because of the funds coming mainly from China and its concomitant effects on us. Let me pick Seth's comment on this before I come to you, Mr. Adomako. Do you also think that, Seth, we are reaching a point where, in terms of partners, development partners, we need a spread and not a concentration, not to label China whatsoever, but the preponderance of funds in today's development discourse is coming from China, lending to countries like ours. They hold funds to allow people like us to take and invest. Do you think that we have to also re-engineer where we are sourcing our funds from in terms of exposure, so that we limit exposure? Because this Sino-Hydro deal is big, and if there are no disbursements coming through or anything like that, it affects a lot of things, which has implications for our fiscal. Would you side with such an argument?
I do, but I don't think it is completely different from what is happening now. In terms of spread, we have different partners. We have dealings with Americans. They bring in money. They give us development support. We do a lot with the Europeans. I mean, if you look at our exports, it's largely going to Europe, not China. You know, about 40% of our exports go to Europe. China is really just about 8%. So we do a lot with the Indians. We even other African countries. So I think in that sense we are quite widespread. But normally development funds, you will get it from where they are also prepared to give. So if China is prepared to give us, why would you say because of over-dependency? And I don't think that we are that dependent on China. Okay. If you look at it, we are quite widespread. And therefore that for me is not too much of the risk. The key thing is that we must strategize as a country so that you don't overly become dependent on a particular commodity and a particular country. That I agree. We need to always have alternatives so that if something goes wrong somewhere, you have a backup to be able to survive and be stable in your economic paradigm. I mean, if you take the bonds market, you always go for Eurobond. You don't go for China. So we are quite widespread. Of course, contributions come from all over the world, depending on who is taking your bonds. So I don't think the risk there is that critical. Rather, as I'm saying, let's strategize such that when it comes to products, we are not depending on commodities alone. You know, when we had the oil find, when we started production, the expectation was that it's going to really help improve our economy. It's helping in terms of contribution to budget and all that. But you look at the statistics, you will notice that since 2011 thereabouts, when we had contribution of industry growing very fast to GDP, I mean, contribution of industry to GDP. When you go into it, industry is defined in different ways. We have the commodities such as the oil, mining, manufacturing, electricity, water. When you put it all together, you see that industry's contribution was growing. At the same time, consistently for about 4 years or so, manufacturing's contribution to GDP was rather declining. Yeah. So it means that the oil fund didn't pull along the manufacturing sector. Yeah. And that is where sometimes we get it wrong. We should strategize such that that resource becomes a catalyst for development. So you use commodity such as oil, to develop sectors that gives you the opportunity to diversify and gives you more room to absorb shocks. And I think, for me, those are the strategies we have to adapt. So if you're getting oil, there's nothing wrong devoting a certain percentage of the oil funds and using it to develop manufacturing. You talked about financing manufacturing in this country. It's tough.
Yeah.
Most of our banks will not finance manufacturing. They will rather finance trading because it's easier and it's more predictable. Manufacturing is tough. So we need to have specialized banks funded, even if it's state funds, and then give some medium to long-term funding to push this manufacturing up. In situations like this, if we were having the entire value chain developed properly, we wouldn't be affected that severely. So I think these are the areas and the lessons we need to learn. Dependent on one country, dependent on one product is not the best option for us as a strategy moving forward. You must always have a diversified and varied arrangement.
Okay. For our viewers, we're just learning that the Ministry of Information will be holding a press conference soon. We would bring that to you as and when we have it right here on JoyNews as we celebrate 25 years of media excellence. I'm going to cut straight to Mr. Adomako for your take on the question I gave to Seth. What do you also make of that argument? Are you with Seth or you hold a contrary view?
I think I agree with Seth that we are not, as a country, only overly exposed to China when it comes to development assistance. I think China is even a letter they're saying to us when it comes to development or bilateral transactions. China has been more for import and export, and so we've had over the years dealing with the Europeans and Americans, and now for the last 12 years we started going to the capital market. Of course, as Seth mentioned, the money may come from all over the world and then aggregated and given to us as a loan, and then we pay it later. So as a country, we still need to be able to look into the future and learn what some countries have learned that has kept them resilient. Because I think that we are not resilient enough. Anytime there is a little shock, our economy starts to tumbling, and we need to be able to develop our resilience. You can't continue to build your country on the Gojik style of economy that they left us in the 1830s. We need to go beyond that, and that is the new paradigm shift, which I think we are not paying attention that much as a country.
We need a new paradigm shift. That's Apia Kusi Adumako. This is the business edition of PM Express. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back. You're welcome back from the break, and this is PM Express Business with me, Philip Nanfuri. My guest, Seth Chum Akwabwa. He's the CEO of the Association of Ghanaian Industries, and Apia Kusi Adomako. He's a regional director, CAT International. And we've been looking at the potential impacts of COVID-19, the coronavirus, on the Ghanaian economy. We started off with a global picture. We zoomed in on the manufacturing sector and other parts of the Ghanaian economy that we believe are a bit exposed when it comes to the issues of the virus. We now want to step into the way forward. Are there any tangible or practical solutions we can find if, touchwood, we are affected by this? Our neighbors are already being affected. One may argue the cases are on the low side as compared to the foreign countries or international economies. But right here in Ghana, what can we do? What should be the way forward? I want us to start off from the Association of Ghanaian Industries. At that level, what is Seth and his friends doing? What are you guys doing to ensure that we are prepared, and if it hits, there's some resilience in there?
Well, I think at association level, and it's the reason why you join business associations. In situations like this, we come together as colleague business people, share information. Information is key. You may have a situation where one company may have so much stock of a particular raw material, and may not be able to produce within a certain long-term period. So information can be shared, products can be shared, and indeed the sectors do business among themselves. So we need to pick a lot of data. Secondly, we need to look at other sources of supply of some of our raw materials. If it's coming from a particular country, say China, and we are no more getting it because production has gone down, we have to start looking from look into other sources. Normally, when you import in smaller quantities, you don't enjoy economies of scale, so the price then becomes high and you're uncompetitive. So this is a time we need to pull resources together. So we are going to establish a small database on this and pick members' information. If you have a hotline where members tell us, I have these products, I'm not getting my supplies, and then we pull a couple of them together. Then even if it's not China and other sources, once we pull them together, we can import in volumes and then share. That kind of situation will help. We also need to start doing business electronically. You know, the Ghanaian most of our business people, they do face-to-face. When you go to China to import things, they want to go and inspect, which is the right thing because sometimes you are unsure of what is going to be shipped to you, even if you inspect a particular batch. So face-to-face is what is happening a lot more. But I think in situations like this, we can also do electronic business once our bankers are prepared to support us. So we need to also look at the business model in dealing with situations like this so that you don't always have to go face-to-face because they must also survive, they must produce. Even if there's coronavirus, I'm sure some of the factories will still be working. The challenge is the traveling. You know, the movement of the people to do the business is always the challenge. But if you developed good network and you have credible people you are working with, banks helping and all that, and the banks should come in here to help as well, so we can have special arrangement that enable people to do business electronically. That will solve part of the problem. And then we can also be sending specific proposals to government. As I said, the president has said that we are earmarking, about $100 million. How do we utilize it in a way that brings benefit beyond this tragedy that we have for ourselves? So I think there are so many things. And then we need to look at the long term. I know government has come up with a lot of beautiful initiatives. One district, one factory, stimulus package, economic zones, business linkages. If all these are working very well, and I know it takes a little while for them to materialize, we need to focus on some of these strategies so that we would develop our manufacturing sector such that the supply chain works. Let's look at our bauxite industry. Today, if you're able to produce the bauxite in that volumes, you have the refinery, you have the entire activities done here. And therefore, in situations like this, you wouldn't struggle because the various sources are all around you. So that's what we need to do. We pick a few products that we think that we have comparative advantage. Look at the entire supply chain. And at each stage, we make sure that we have enough value addition in Ghana. In that case, we are preparing for any eventuality in the future. These kind of things, today we may resolve it, but it will happen again sometime, somehow. It may not be a virus. It could be a particular country you are so much dependent on going down, or the financial, turmoil that we experienced some years back. There's so many things that happens in the global market that you don't have control over. So your strategy should always be that prepare so that you always have backup. And then in that case, if situations happen, you are good enough to go.
Mr. Adomako, I was just going through some of the notes you shared with me. And at some point you said, certainly we're in crisis times and government cannot be blamed on measures that can reclaim the nation from the scourge of the virus. Seth has given us the AGI perspective infused with some national level, particularly on the 100 million that the president spoke about yesterday. Beyond that, Mr. Adomako, when you take the nation's fiscal, our expenditure, our revenue, you look at our monetary authorities, what do you think we can take? We are not health experts, so for the health side, we leave it to the health people. But on the business side, what do you think we can do on the national side, or on the fiscal side, I beg your pardon, on the monetary side? What are some of the things that you think you can do? I'm just going through your points, but I want you to.
So I'd like to say that we have this Fiscal Responsibility Act that put a cap on how much government can borrow in relation to the 5% from the
fiscal deficit.
Yes. And now this year, government is looking at 4.7% of the GDP.
Yeah.
I'm not very sure that we can meet that target. And in this crisis time, I think that the government can go to Parliament to seek for derogation of that particular line, to allow government to go beyond that, because we are in crisis time, say that we can use those resources to salvage the economy. Because if we allow this cap to, restrict us, I think we might end up, sliding deep into a recession, if not even a depression. So I think that government needs to do that. But government borrowing should also be very targeted to sectors and businesses that they think that they can have a good impact, potential impact in sustaining the economy. And I also want to say that business have also gone for loans. And if, let's say, because of this crisis, you are not able to pay your loan, I think that there should be a measure said that the banks will not come and attach your property because you have defaulted. That is a very key thing that, Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana needs to do to prevent businesses from being attacked by banks for not paying loans because of this crisis. Because certainly we are in different times, and when you are in crisis time, I think things are not business as usual. You need to come up with, extraordinary measures.
This is a question I need to ask Seth just before I come to you. Just quick one. Do you think we have the willpower to execute such things? I like the point you mentioned on the part about our Fiscal Responsibility Act and that part that limits our deficit number. Do you think we have that willpower to implement such measures if the crisis hits?
No, I think the government can go to Parliament and ask Parliament, look, we are in crisis, so let's take that away. Let's increase it, let's say 10%. We could look at US, their deficit is over trillions of dollars. It's not bad to have a deficit. And I think that if we want to still stick to the 5%, I think we will end up inflicting wounds upon ourselves. Okay. These laws were not made from heaven. We made the law for ourselves, and we are the ones who can still amend the law.
Okay. Seth, you wanted to make a point?
Oh, just a final comment that we've discussed a lot.
Yeah.
There are challenges that are confronting us, but we shouldn't panic. I think it's a very important point that we should not panic, because when you panic, you rather worsen your situation. And globally, there is, pandemic now, but we should not panic, because when you panic, the tendency is that people start hoarding goods because they know we're not going to have enough of these products in their system, so let me go and hoard. You create more problems. You create shortages, prices will go up, and you create all kinds of problems that is unnecessary. We should just relax. I think that government is doing well in terms of the plans and the preparation of prevention. And in case, in an unfortunate situation where we discover one, the health authorities should be able to deal with it. But as businesses and as individuals, we should go about our business, in a normal way. The preventive mechanisms that are being preached, let's all go by it. Let's do that. Let's respect the advice that is being given. But we shouldn't panic at all. If we panic, we create unnecessary problems for ourselves. Businesses will go on. Everything will be fine. I think we shouldn't panic. I don't think we've reached that crisis stage where we don't even know what to do. We should get out of hand.
Mr. Adomako, do you see a sense of panic when you engage with people, particularly on the business front? Do you see that people are making drastic changes to their lines of business or ways of business?
I don't see panic when I talk to businesses, but what I see, people get concerned about it, which is a natural thing, natural response to this crisis. So when you are concerned about it, you tend to look at other options that is available to you, other reasonable options. And I think it is normal for business to be concerned about this crisis. Like Seth said, that there's no need for panic. You don't need to go to ShopRite and buy all their products and leave the shop empty for the next visitors who come.
But that's what people are doing.
No, I think that
I'm sure you've heard about the sanitizer procurement. People are buying sanitizers left, right, center. Everybody wants to stack up on something. Hand towels. I went to a pharmacy last week, Saturday, and there were no big sanitizers. It was only the little ones. So I asked the gentleman, the pharmacist, that was happening. He said people have bought all the big sanitizers. They've left only the little ones.
You see, buying the sanitizers will not stop the spread of the. What we need to look at, how can we strengthen our public health system so that we'll be able to do in our proper surveillance, detect diseases early, isolate and quarantine, so that we will not become like China or Europe of Africa.
Okay, we have just a few minutes more. I know we've mentioned a lot, and I don't want us to be overly repetitive. But I want to give a minute to each of you to summarize your points for us this evening, the key points that you want the viewers to take away. I'll start with Seth, and I'll come to you, Mr. Dumako.
Well, first of all, I believe that for business is a continuous process. We're taking loans, we are doing business. Business will continue as usual in spite of this challenge we have. As a matter of fact, we should rather look into the opportunities that will arise out of this. The fact that we need to spread our network in terms of sources of raw materials, for example. The fact that we should look at local sources of developing some of these products so that we are competitive. We should be preparing to take advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade, which is a larger market, and not only depend on one or two markets outside our jurisdiction. We should take full advantage of it. And then in the interim, in this period of challenge, we should work together as manufacturers, as businesses, contact ourselves, share a lot of information, look for other ways of doing business, and we should be able to survive and grow. I think that we have the strength and we have the capacity to overcome this challenge.
Okay. Mr. Dumako.
So I would say that, as Seth said, we have the capacity to be able to overcome these challenges. And I think the president yesterday assured Ghanaians that $100 billion will be devoted as a strategy for this country. But what I want to say is that government needs to start engaging the private sector, because, I mean, if government is going to take, for example, we wake up one day and say, look, the whole country is under lockdown, without even getting input of the private sector, I don't think that would be the best. So all measures that government is taking, government needs to have the private sector and also, business and private sector involved, so that it will be a mutual benefit for everybody.
Right. So you've heard it all here on the business edition of PM Express with me, Philip Nanfuri. My guest, Setchum Akawa. He's the CEO of the Association of Ghana Industries, and Apia Kosi Adumako. He's the regional director of CATS International. We've been looking at the potential impacts of COVID-19, the coronavirus, in the Ghanaian context, and how best our businesses are prepared and resilient if, touch wood, the case